Hey guys! Wishing you a peaceful night full of rest and relaxation tonight. We're going somewhere cold, quiet, and strangely comforting. Picture this: the wind is howling across a vast, white expanse. The ocean is frozen at the edges, sheep are tucked into creaky wooden sheds, and up on a hillside a turf-roofed home glows faintly with the light of a single whale oil lamp. That's where you are tonight, inside that home, wrapped in layers of wool, trying to fall asleep in 19th century Iceland. You probably won't survive this. Really. You're used to thermostats and fleece blankets. Meanwhile, the Icelanders of the 1800s, they were sleeping through Arctic gusts in clothes that smelled vaguely like sour milk and ash. And somehow they liked it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through a low wooden doorway, more of a crawl space really, ducking your head instinctively as you enter the warmth of a 19th century Icelandic baðstofa. That's the main living and sleeping room of the household, and tonight it's quieter than a snow-drowned forest. Your boots are off your fingers thawing, and the smell of smoke wool and fermented something or other clings to every beam. The air inside is thick and slow, and you can feel the hush in your bones. There's only one lamp burning a whale oil flame that's struggling to stay awake just like you. Shadows stretch across sheepskin-covered benches, where the entire household will soon squeeze together for the night. You take your spot awkwardly, nudging someone's socked foot to make space. Outside, it's pitch black, though it's only 5 in the evening. You glance at the tiny window, more a suggestion of glass than anything, and see your own breath fogging it from the inside. The wind rattles against the turf walls, but it doesn't feel hostile. More like background noise, the kind that fades behind the heartbeat of the house. The walls, thick with packed sod and stone, don't just block the cold, they muffle sound. You notice how different quiet is here. Not sterile, not digital, but old, alive and padded by centuries of habit. Every now and then, someone shifts. You hear a soft cough, the creak of wool stretching as a body turns, and the rustle of straw under the bedding. It's almost time to sleep, though. Sleep in this house is a social affair. You're not escaping into a king-sized bed with blackout curtains and a white noise machine. No. You're curling up with Grandma Jónsdóttir on one side and your cousin who probably just sneezed on you on the other. You pull your wool hood a little lower. Cozy is subjective. One historian describes the winter routine here as a daily commitment to stillness. That's poetic. You might describe it as being gently trapped in a scratchy sauna with 7 of your relatives and a goose. Either way, it's working. Your heartbeat slows. The flickering light seems to sync with your breath. Icelandic winters were long and brutal, sure, but they had their own rhythm. The people didn't fight the darkness. They folded themselves into it, slept through it. If the sun didn't rise well, neither did they. Some families slept 16 to 20 hours during the coldest stretches. That's right, 2/3 of the day horizontal snoring into sheep pelts. Historians still argue whether this near hibernation was a cultural adaptation or just extreme seasonal fatigue. One theory suggests it was a practical response to the calorie deficit. Less movement meant fewer meals. Another says it was spiritual, the body resting the mind, dreaming the soul, well lingering. A fringe journal once published a piece claiming that the Icelanders of this time may have entered semi-lucid sleep states, blending vivid dreams with waking chores. There's no solid evidence for this, but it's kind of magical to imagine half-awake figures stumbling around mumbling poetry while churning sour butter. Back inside the Badstofa, someone murmurs an old lullaby. You don't understand the words, but the melody is slow and looping just enough motion to rock you toward unconsciousness. Your limbs are heavy. You notice your face is cold, but your torso is hot. Classic uneven wool distribution. You tuck your hands into your armpits. That's what people did. No hot water bottles here, just creative use of your own anatomy, and possibly a warm loaf of rye bread if the oven's still holding heat. That's not a joke. A wrapped loaf under the covers was both midnight snack and thermal support. You shift a little, careful not to wake the cat curled near your feet. The cat, by the way, is not just a pet, it's also insulation. And probably a better sleeper than you. Time blurs. The lamp gutters. You wonder briefly what your modern mattress would say if it saw you now slumped half-frozen sharing breath with 4 strangers and a goat. Then again, maybe it would be jealous. There's something primal about this sleep. You're not powering down, you're surrendering. And as your eyelids finally give in, you realize in this place, in this time, sleep isn't a pause. It's the season's main event. The long winter doesn't have to be endured, it can be dreamed through. One shared heartbeat at a time. You blink awake not because the sun's up, but because someone just rolled onto your foot. Again, it's probably the blacksmith's niece. She kicks in her sleep. You consider retaliation, then remember you're supposed to be channeling inner 19th century serenity. So instead, you shift slightly, let your toe regain circulation, and try to sink back into the embrace of collective hibernation. In this Icelandic wintertime has melted into something vague. Outside, the snow keeps falling with the rhythm of breath. It's always night or nearly night. Inside the Badstofa, no one's in a hurry to distinguish today from yesterday. You're learning the Icelandic art of winter sleep, a kind of daily disappearing act practiced for centuries. Here, sleep isn't just a biological function, it's a lifestyle. During the darkest months, roughly mid-November through February, the average Icelander might spend up to 20 hours in bed. Not all asleep, of course. That would be ambitious even by medieval standards. But in repose, dozing, whispering, snacking on dried cod, composing verse in the dark. To modern ears, it might sound romantic, or impossible, or both. But it made sense in a world where candles were precious, food was rationed, and roads vanished under ice for months. You stayed indoors because, well, what else would you do? You weren't planting, you weren't fishing, you certainly weren't doom-scrolling. Historians debate whether this deep winter dormancy was an Icelandic invention, or just an extreme version of what people across Northern Europe did when daylight hours dwindled. There are Old English references to first sleep and second sleep, a biphasic rhythm. But in Iceland, it seemed to reach theatrical levels. Some scholars argue it bordered on intentional hibernation, timed to conserve heat and calories. Others insist it was more spiritual, a chance to commune with dreams and ancestors alike. Whatever the theory, the practical result was, this family's collapsed into extended periods of slowness. No alarms, no clocks, just the same sequence every day, supper, storytelling, stillness. You feel that rhythm now. The house moves like a breathing creature, each sleeper part of its pulse. Someone mutters in their sleep. Someone else giggles faintly. One of the children is whispering lines from a saga, practicing his storytelling voice even in semi-dream. A few hours pass like this, not in bursts of REM cycles, but in waves. You wake a little, you adjust your layers, you slip back under. Sometimes someone lights the lamp to check the time on the family's single wooden wall clock. But mostly the dark just stretches on. And here's the part that might shock your 21st century sensibilities: nobody fights it. No one talks about fixing their sleep schedule. No one's inventing blue light glasses or counting sheep. If you wake at 3 a.m., that's fine. You lie still, you mumble a prayer. Or you whisper a verse about a sword fight on a lava field, and then you drift off again. Fringe thinkers have even suggested that Icelanders used this sleep-heavy time to enhance memory. With no external stimuli, their inner landscapes became sharper. Some travelers' journals describe being startled at the poetry recitation skills of Icelandic farmers, who could recite hours of Rymir epic verse from memory, many of which were learned during these long nights. You wonder for a moment whether sleep was Iceland's real education system. But it wasn't all snoozing and sonnets. You'd occasionally rise to relieve yourself outside awkwardly in the snow, perhaps trying not to fall into a drift. You'd stumble back in, frozen and blinking, and wedge yourself back into the communal bedbench like a reluctant Tetris piece. The house might wake briefly during these mini interludes. Someone might sip cold gruel. Someone else might stoke the hearth for morning porridge, even though morning is more a theory than a fact. You begin to admire the patience of it all, the way Icelanders didn't fight the winter, they dissolved into it. This was their season of withdrawal, of interior life, of turning inward, not just literally, but spiritually. You recall an old folk belief that winter dreams could reveal hidden truths if you were still enough to listen. It's hard to picture that mindset now, isn't it? Modern life rewards momentum. Wake up, power on, keep moving. But here in this little frozen world, inertia is sacred. You realize the winter doesn't feel endless. It feels full. You glance around. The oil lamp is out. Someone near the foot of the bed is lightly snoring. You lie still and let your thoughts drift. Perhaps to that mysterious woman in the village who says she speaks to ghosts through her dreams. Or to the boy who swore he saw the northern lights spell out a message last winter. You're not sure if you're awake or dreaming. And in this place, that's kind of the point. You wake again, not from noise or sunlight, but from a peculiar silence. That kind of silence that's louder than anything. The kind that presses softly against your ears like woolen mittens wrapped around your head. It takes you a moment to remember where or when you are. Then the smell hits you. Burned sheep dung, a hint of sour whey, maybe dried fish. You're back in the badstofa, and it's still very much winter. By now, your body is beginning to surrender to the rhythm of this world. You sleep when it's dark, wake when it's darker, and rest in between. But that doesn't mean your mind has stopped wandering. Icelanders of the 19th century didn't just lie still for 20 hours a day. No, they talked, whispered, wove stories into the dark like threads in a night-colored loom. And so tonight you listen. There's a voice to your left, deep, slow, curling around consonants, like a boat navigating ice flows. It's the grandfather of the house. His name is probably something dramatic and unpronounceable to your modern tongue telling a saga. No script, no book, just memory and cadence and the heat of story passed from mouth to ear for centuries. Iceland's sagas weren't dusty things stuck in libraries. They were oral, performed like bedtime concerts by anyone old enough to remember and charismatic enough to hold a room. And in winter, everyone was an audience. You close your eyes again, not to sleep, but to sink into the tale. There's a warrior. There's betrayal. Someone dies dramatically on a glacier. Someone else marries an elf. There's a sheep dispute, and probably at least one vengeful ghost. You smile slightly. These old stories are messy, sprawling, oddly cozy. Historians still argue whether saga nights served as true entertainment or disguised moral instruction. Did they shape Icelandic identity, reinforce norms, keep family trees straight? Or were they just the 19th century version of binge-watching Viking Netflix under a pile of furs? A lesser-known fringe theory claims that sagas were also mnemonic tools training minds to retain complex detail over long winters when external input was scarce. Whether that's true or not, the results were real. Iceland had one of the highest rates of literacy in Europe at the time, despite near-total rural isolation. And yes, you're technically illiterate in this moment, but no one's judging you. You're here for the vibe. The saga continues. You feel the words more than hear them now, pulsing through the beams, softened by that ever-present turf smell and the damp wool lining your sleeves. It doesn't matter if you miss a few lines. The story loops back, circles around. Icelandic narrative structure is like the snowdrifts outside, no sharp edges, just soft layers. A soft laugh ripples through the room. Someone enjoyed the bit about the unlucky fisherman and the talking seal. You do too, though you still can't tell if it was supposed to be funny or terrifying. This is how long nights pass, not alone, not silent, but wrapped in layers both literal and emotional. Icelandic families huddled together not just for warmth, but for presence, for continuity. Everyone heard the same stories. Everyone whispered the same prayers. And somewhere in that half-lit blur, sleep and myth and memory blurred together. You shift again. Your elbow finds the edge of the wooden bench, not ideal. You pull your hood further down, tucking your chin in like a turtle. Someone hands you a chunk of dried rye bread. It's stale, yes, but also weirdly comforting. The bread has been kept under the bedding. It's slightly warm, which is both sweet and maybe slightly gross. But this is how people survived winter, sharing warmth, sharing food, sharing breath and silence and tales. It's not glamorous, but it's whole. Even the goats in the corner seem content. You let your eyes flutter closed again, not because you're tired, but because you don't want to break the spell. The saga is winding down. There's a soft sigh from someone nearby. The fire hisses as a wet log collapses in the hearth. And just like that, the house dozes off again. The story slips into dream. And so do you. You're not sure what time it is. And honestly, no one else is either. The concept of time here in winter Iceland is a little malleable. There's the time before the kettle sings, and the time after the dog starts snoring. There's mealtime and story time and prayer time, but they don't follow clocks so much as moods. You've landed in a place where hours stretch and curl like steam from a peat fire. Right now, the fire is low, the house a little cooler, the air smelling faintly of old wool and fermented shark hakarl, if you're feeling brave enough to name it. You shift under the sheepskins and fur, and your hand brushes something warm and moving. A chicken. No one explained why a chicken is sleeping beside you, but it seems rude to wake her now. This is how things worked in 19th century Icelandic homes. Animals weren't just livestock, they were bunkmates. Not because of some rustic sentimentality, but because Iceland was cold. Unforgivingly, unrelentingly cold. And houses, turf-roofed and stone-lined as they were, needed all the heat they could trap. So the entire household, humans, dogs, cats, the occasional goat or chicken, nested together like some kind of folkloric Noah's Ark, exhaling warmth into the same few cubic meters. The Batstofa wasn't just a living room, it was a survival strategy. Historians argue about the actual temperatures inside these homes. Some suggest a mild and manageable 5 to 10 degrees, 41 to 50 degrees. Others suspect it got colder, especially overnight. Either way, the insulation wasn't ideal. And neither were the layers homespun wool heavy cloaks, animal pelts, none of which helped much when your socks had holes and your roof was weeping ice melt onto your forehead at 300 a.m. So how did you stay warm? First, you huddled. Bodies were heat generators and close contact was key. Modesty was a luxury reserved for warmer months. In winter, the whole family essentially became one big, sleepy cuddle puddle. Second, you layered. Multiple tunics, mittens layered over socks, layered over woolen leg wraps. And then the real trick, vetterklady garments believed to protect against damp spirits and supernatural chills. It's unclear if they worked, but hey, at least they were stylish, in a scratchy, rune-covered kind of way. Third, you adapted. Icelanders had a famously stoic relationship with discomfort. You simply endured. Complaining about the cold wasn't really a thing because everyone was cold. Plus, the more you fussed, the more body heat you wasted. A quirky historical detail. Some Icelanders believed that cold dreams where you saw snow or ice were warnings from spirits urging you to tuck in tighter. So naturally, if you dreamed of glaciers, you'd wake up at another sheep pelt and maybe whisper a little apology to the hidden folk for leaving your toes exposed. You glance around the room again. The fire's embers are pulsing softly, casting the kind of light that makes even lumps of wood look like sleeping animals. A teenage boy stirs beside you, murmuring something about a sea monster. Maybe he's dreaming. Or maybe he's quoting Voluspa, again the old poetic prophecy everyone seems to have half memorized. You smile just a little. It's strange how close you've become to this odd patchwork family. The grandmother with her carved knitting needles, the sleepy goat that snores louder than the farmer, the child who keeps asking if you're secretly an elf. You've been absorbed into their hibernation bubble, and it's surprisingly hard to feel like an outsider in a place with no private space. You shift again, nudging the chicken gently with your elbow. She clucks once softly, then tucks her head back under her wing. You do the same with your hood, letting the fabric pull your senses inward. And now you understand sleep here isn't just physical rest. It's preservation. Of heat, yes, but also of memory, of family, of the story, of the house itself. The same fire that once warmed your ancestors now warms you almost literally. The same walls have absorbed generations of breath laughter and muttered dreams. One last thing before you drift off again. There's a peculiar object by the hearth, something you hadn't noticed before. A small stone figure smoothed by time set beside the poker and the ladle. You ask someone what it is. They shrug. A gift for the Huldufolk, they whisper. Just in case. Of course, just in case. You close your eyes. The chicken sighs. Someone across the room starts softly humming a lullaby older than Christianity, and the fire crackles just enough to keep the frost from claiming the walls. You wake to motion, not noise, not light, just the soft rhythmic shuffle of bodies stirring under layers of wool and fur. It's not morning, not really. The sun still refuses to rise in any convincing way. But something in the rhythm of the house has shifted. People are stretching, groaning, reorienting themselves in the darkness like a symphony tuning up. What time is it? Hard to say. Icelanders in the 19th century didn't rely on clocks the way you do, especially not during winter when time flattened into one long, dusky blur. They divided the day more by activity than by hour, and during these cold, endless nights, one of the most sacred rituals was about to begin handwork. That's right, you're about to spend the next several hours spinning yarn. Try not to get too excited. The badstofa becomes a kind of sleepy factory as women and older children pull spindles and carded wool from under benches. The room fills with the gentle whir of distaffs, the soft clack of knitting needles, and the occasional thwack of a loom. No one speaks much. The rhythm of the work is meditative, hypnotic, and frankly, a bit contagious. So you give in. Someone hands you a lump of unwashed fleece. You attempt to card it. It's greasy, smells vaguely like the goat. It resists your efforts. That's fine. No one expects much from the newbie. Woolworking wasn't a hobby here, it was survival. Icelandic homes functioned like miniature textile workshops in winter. Every sock, every mitten, every shawl came from hours, weeks of patient, repetitive labor done in near darkness. Icelandic wool, known for its insulating properties and water resistance, was the country's pride. Entire families contributed, with women leading the effort. One curious tradition spinning songs. Melancholic little ditties meant to help keep time or tell cautionary tales. You catch snatches of one now, a lullaby about a ghost who unraveled all his wife's knitting because she skipped Sunday Mass. It's haunting and oddly motivating. Historians still debate how structured these winter work sessions were. Some say families followed strict quotas, producing a certain amount of yarn or woven cloth each week. Others argue it was more fluid, guided by mood energy and available daylight, or lack thereof. But one thing's certain, this quiet productivity wasn't optional. Everyone contributed. Even the very old or very young had tasks. And while men typically worked outdoors, fishing, farming, or tending animals, winter brought them inside too. Mending tools, fixing shoes, carving buttons. You glance across the room and see an old man sharpening a sheep shearing blade with a look of intense, slightly terrifying focus. Even leisure here carried a purpose. Remember those sagas from earlier? Some were copied by hand during these hours. Iceland had a long tradition of literate self-sufficiency. People wrote what they couldn't afford to buy. Manuscripts were recopied generation after generation, often in homes exactly like this one. Ink made from soot quills cut from seabirds and endless patience. You attempt a few more strokes with your wool cards. It still looks like a matted hairball, but no one laughs. They just hand you a cup of sour milk. You sip politely. It tastes surprisingly okay. Maybe your standards are shifting. Then someone starts a remor, a type of epic poem sung in nasal, half-chanted tones. It's like Icelandic beat poetry met Gregorian chant and decided to raise sheep together. You have no idea what the words mean, but the cadence is soothing. The whole room settles into it like a boat rocking gently on dark, slow water. A candle flickers. Wax drips into an old shell. The girl beside you yawns dramatically, then keeps spinning. Even exhaustion doesn't halt the wool. And here's something funny: you don't feel bored. You're calm, engaged. There's something deeply satisfying about this low-stakes, repetitive labor. You're helping create warmth. Not just literal warmth either, but a kind of communal comfort. Every stitch in a sock is a small defiance against the long, frozen dark. The chicken shuffles beside you again, pecking at a dropped crumb of bread. The goat sneezes. Somewhere outside, a raven croaks once, just to remind you the world still exists beyond the turf walls. You card the wool a little more carefully this time. The fibers start to separate. A bit of fluff floats into the candlelight. You catch it, press it gently back into the pile. And just like that, you're part of the rhythm, the spinning, the singing, the slow march of survival disguised as domestic quiet. You're lulled now, not by silence, but by sound. A room full of hands working wool and voices humming sagas creates a white noise of tradition, and as your eyelids droop again, you realize the day's second nap is not only accepted here, it's expected. Welcome to the Icelandic segmented sleep cycle. Modern folks might find this odd, but in 19th century Iceland, as in much of pre-industrial Europe, people didn't sleep in one long stretch through the night. Instead, they embraced something more fluid. Two main sleep periods, often called first sleep and second sleep, with a wakeful phase in between. And you're smack dab in that liminal zone between dozing off and firing up for another 3 hours of knitting, reading aloud, or checking the weather through a hole in the turf. The first sleep often started not long after supper. The darkness made staying awake much harder than it is in our LED-lit world, and the fire only burned so much peat. You'd all huddle under the bedding and drift off together. But then, like clockwork, you'd wake again. This wasn't insomnia. This was built into the rhythm of things. Historians still debate why this bifurcated sleep developed. Was it biological, circadian, merely practical? No one knows for sure. But what's clear is that the midnight wake wasn't idle time. It was precious, and it was deeply human. In that in-between phase, people whispered secrets, shared dreams, prayed or told long meandering stories. Sometimes, couples snuck away for private time, as private as one could get with a goat and 4 chickens in the same room. Other times, a family member might read aloud from a cherished saga or sing a hymn in the near dark. Tonight, your host pulls a worn, sheepskin-covered book from under a bench. She smooths the pages reverently. The light is faint but enough. It's an old Icelandic homily handwritten generations ago. The words are measured, soothing, and spoken in that gentle, lulling cadence that turns even hellfire sermons into sleepy poetry. And here's where things get weird. Your brain, half asleep, starts to mix the words with the crackle of the fire and the soft rustling of wool. The result: a sensation somewhere between dreaming and eavesdropping on ghosts. The room is a sea of partial consciousness. One child snores softly, face first in her knitting. The grandmother mutters a line from a psalm, then promptly forgets it and hums instead. Someone is stirring oatmeal in the back because, yes, it's technically breakfast. Or maybe dinner. You gave up on trying to define meals after your second bowl of cold lamb porridge at midnight. You're surprised how quickly your body adapts to this pattern. Sleep, wake, work, rest again. It feels honest, organic. You've never been so tired and so at peace at once. A fringe theory you heard earlier in the week comes to mind. Something about segmented sleep unlocking creativity, allowing for vivid dreams, prophetic visions, even conversations with the divine. Icelanders of the era might not have put it in those exact terms, but they certainly treated this midnight interval as sacred. That girl who asked if you were an elf, she's whispering to a wooden spoon now. Possibly prayer, possibly gossip. Hard to say. Your own thoughts drift back to your earlier dream of a volcano wrapped in a shawl of a fish reciting poetry. None of it makes sense. All of it feels important. Outside, the wind howls, suddenly rattling the turf wall. Everyone pauses, just for a second, listening. Then someone mumbles. Just the frost elves arguing again, and the whole room resumes as if that explains everything. You turn onto your side. A wool-stuffed pillow creaks. Someone tosses another sod of peat on the fire, and the sparks snap back with the enthusiasm of a tired but obedient dog. The woman with the book closes it softly and kisses the cover. She doesn't say goodnight. She doesn't need to. Slowly, one by one, the room begins to soften again. Eyes flutter closed. Needles stop clacking. The chicken nestles deeper into your armpit, which, let's be honest, you've stopped finding weird. You slip back into sleep without even noticing, just like they've done for centuries. One life cycle, 2 sleeps, infinite stories floating in between. You awaken again, sort of. Not with a jolt, not because of a loud sound or morning alarm. Just slowly, like a seal surfacing from dark water. The fire is still barely glowing in the hearth. The wool-smelling air is heavy and still. Most bodies remain tucked under shared bedding, but there's a soft shift in the energy of the room. This is the second sleep ending. Time to begin what counts as morning in the Icelandic winter, even though the sun won't fully rise for hours. You sit up groggy but strangely rested. Outside, it's still dark. Inside, it's breakfast time. Now comes one of the most peculiar and cozy parts of your stay, the daily meal rituals, which are humble, repetitive, and oddly comforting. Breakfast in 19th century Iceland. Think sour milk, dried fish, and a mash of barley or moss porridge that clings stubbornly to the bowl, and to your spoon, and to your hopes for variety. But you don't complain, not just because you're polite. There's something deeply satisfying about eating the same simple food in the same wooden bowl every morning, handed to you by the same woman with the same sleepy smile. The house stirs. Children rise with hair like haystacks. The goat lets out a long theatrical yawn. One man, possibly the patriarch, goes outside to check the weather. He comes back covered in frost and mutters something that sounds like, "Today is a fish-drying day," though you're pretty sure no fish would agree. Here's a quirky fact. Icelanders had a way of ranking their days by how bad the weather wasn't. Good drying day was actually a compliment. Historians still argue whether this understated weather language reflected stoicism or just strategic optimism. Meals are eaten slowly, mostly in silence, interrupted only by a child slurping too enthusiastically, or someone muttering a half-remembered proverb. If the moss is thick, the sheep won't complain. You nod like that makes sense. Maybe it does. The only true luxury is coffee. Well, coffee substitute. Real beans were expensive, so many families drank a roasted barley or chicory version. It's vaguely coffee-ish if you squint. One woman offers you a cup. It smells like burnt toast and hope. As people eat, there's no real rush to start the day. Because here's the thing, during deep winter, most of your day happens indoors. Farming is limited. Roads are frozen. Horses are reluctant. So household tasks continue in the same rhythm: repair, mend, sew, spin, repeat. But today there's one chore that must be done: fetching water. You volunteer. It's a short walk, they say. You'll be fine, they say. So they bundle you in a sheepskin cloak, hand you a wooden bucket, and open the turf door to what feels like the surface of the moon. Snow crunches under your boots. The cold punches your nose like a smug boxer. The sky is a swirling violet haze, neither fully night nor day. And then you find it. The water source is a spring fed by geothermal runoff, warm enough to resist freezing even now. Steam rises from the black rocks. You bend down, dip the bucket, and pause. Because it's beautiful. Unreasonably beautiful. The kind of beauty no one ever mentions in history books because it's too soft, too quiet. You carry the bucket back, arms trembling. Your reward. A smile, a dry pair of socks, and the best sip of warm whey you've ever had, which isn't saying much, but still. Here's another curious tidbit. Many Icelandic households fermented milk to preserve it, creating a range of odd-tasting but probiotic-rich drinks. Skyr might be trendy now, but its ancestors were not exactly Instagram material. As everyone finishes eating, the badstofa transforms again, this time into something almost like a living room. People move a bit more freely now. There's chatting, a little laughter, and even some grooming. You plop down beside a teenager who is carefully combing lice from her sister's hair, using a carved bone pick. They offer to do yours next. You politely decline. This moment, more than any so far, makes you realize just how communal everything is. Privacy isn't just scarce, it's an alien concept. But so is loneliness. Even simple grooming becomes social. A chance to talk, to share news, to sing snatches of ballads. Historians still argue whether Iceland's tight-knit domestic life led to higher emotional intelligence or merely improved lice management. Probably both. You lean back against a turf wall. The wool blanket is wrapped around your shoulders like a sleepy hug. Outside, the frost glitters like spilled sugar. Inside, someone starts baking flatbread over a hot stone. You close your eyes for a moment and hear it again, the same steady rhythm as before. The spinning wheel turning, the fire cracking, the lull of quiet purpose. The second sleep might be over, but you're not done drifting just yet. You awaken again, sort of. Not with a jolt, not because of a loud sound or morning alarm, just slowly, like a seal surfacing from dark water. The fire is still barely glowing in the hearth. The wool-smelling air is heavy and still. Most bodies remain tucked under shared bedding, but there's a soft shift in the energy of the room. This is the second sleep ending. Time to begin what counts as morning in the Icelandic winter, even though the sun won't fully rise for hours. You sit up groggy but strangely rested. Outside, it's still dark. Inside, it's breakfast time. Now comes one of the most peculiar and cozy parts of your stay, the daily meal rituals, which are humble, repetitive, and oddly comforting. Breakfast in 19th century Iceland. Think sour milk, dried fish, and a mash of barley or moss porridge that clings stubbornly to the bowl, and to your spoon, and to your hopes for variety. But you don't complain, not just because you're polite. There's something deeply satisfying about eating the same simple food in the same wooden bowl every morning, handed to you by the same woman with the same sleepy smile. The house stirs, children rise with hair like haystacks. The goat lets out a long theatrical yawn. One man, possibly the patriarch, goes outside to check the weather. He comes back covered in frost and mutters something that sounds like, "Today is a fish-drying day," though you're pretty sure no fish would agree. Here's a quirky fact. Icelanders had a way of ranking their days by how bad the weather wasn't. Good drying day was actually a compliment. Historians still argue whether this understated weather language reflected stoicism or just strategic optimism. Meals are eaten slowly, mostly in silence, interrupted only by a child slurping too enthusiastically or someone muttering a half-remembered proverb. If the moss is thick, the sheep won't complain. You nod like that makes sense. Maybe it does. The only true luxury is coffee. Well, coffee substitute. Real beans were expensive, so many families drank a roasted barley or chicory version. It's vaguely coffee-ish if you squint. One woman offers you a cup. It smells like burnt toast and hope. As people eat, there's no real rush to start the day. Because here's the thing, during deep winter, most of your day happens indoors. Farming is limited. Roads are frozen. Horses are reluctant. So household tasks continue in the same rhythm: repair, mend, sew, spin, repeat. But today there's one chore that must be done: fetching water. You volunteer. It's a short walk, they say. You'll be fine, they say. So they bundle you in a sheepskin cloak, hand you a wooden bucket, and open the turf door to what feels like the surface of the moon. Snow crunches under your boots. The cold punches your nose like a smug boxer. The sky is a swirling violet haze, neither fully night nor day. And then you find it. The water source is a spring fed by geothermal runoff, warm enough to resist freezing even now. Steam rises from the black rocks. You bend down, dip the bucket, and pause. Because it's beautiful. Unreasonably beautiful. The kind of beauty no one ever mentions in history books because it's too soft, too quiet. You carry the bucket back arms, trembling. Your reward, a smile. A dry pair of socks, and the best sip of warm whey you've ever had, which isn't saying much, but still. Here's another curious tidbit. Many Icelandic households fermented milk to preserve it, creating a range of odd-tasting but probiotic-rich drinks. Skyr might be trendy now, but its ancestors were not exactly Instagram material. As everyone finishes eating, the badstofa transforms again, this time into something almost like a living room. People move a bit more freely now. There's chatting, a little laughter, and even some grooming. You plop down beside a teenager who is carefully combing lice from her sister's hair using a carved bone pick. They offer to do yours next. You politely decline. This moment, more than any so far, makes you realize just how communal everything is. Privacy isn't just scarce, it's an alien concept. But so is loneliness. Even simple grooming becomes social. A chance to talk, to share news, to sing snatches of ballads. Historians still argue whether Iceland's tight-knit domestic life led to higher emotional intelligence or merely improved lice management. Probably both. You lean back against a turf wall. The wool blanket is wrapped around your shoulders like a sleepy hug. Outside, the frost glitters like spilled sugar. Inside, someone starts baking flatbread over a hot stone. You close your eyes for a moment and hear it again, the same steady rhythm as before. The spinning wheel turning, the fire cracking, the lull of quiet purpose. The second sleep might be over, but you're not done drifting just yet. You're not quite sure how long you've been sitting there. 20 minutes. 2 hours. Time in this dim womb of turf and wool and tail spinning seems to stretch like softened leather. You blink slowly, the scent of lichen soup still clinging to the air, and realize that the room has grown subtly more animated. It's early evening now, although the sun never made much of an appearance. You'd know it only by the shift in tone voices, rising a bit, laughter weaving more boldly between sentences, and someone clapping their hands to signal the next activity, one that's both oddly communal and deeply introspective. It's scripture reading and reflection time, a quiet custom at the heart of Icelandic domestic life. You probably didn't expect to end your rustic fantasy retreat with a theological deep dive. But here you are sitting cross-legged on sheepskins, while an elderly man with eyebrows like storm clouds opens a blackened Bible. Iceland in the 1800s was deeply Lutheran, thanks to centuries of Danish influence. And although few people owned much, nearly every household had a Bible, usually in Gothic script, and often handed down through generations. You glance at the pages. They're stained dog-eared and annotated in the margins with little notes like, "Sheep gone mad, pray harder." The man reads slowly, pausing every few lines for discussion. Sometimes people nod solemnly. Sometimes someone mutters something wry under their breath and everyone snickers like school children. This isn't stiff religious study. It's more like group therapy Viking style. Here's a mainstream historical nugget. Icelanders were among the first in Europe to translate the entire Bible into the vernacular and make it widely available. Even peasants were expected to read or hear scripture regularly. But don't worry, this isn't a dry sermon. Tonight's passage involves a prophet surviving a storm by hiding in the belly of something large and fishy. The youngest child gasps, like the man in Amma's seal story. Everyone laughs. You realize that in this house, myth and scripture share equal shelf space in the imagination. Then comes the odd part. As the passage ends, the family turns to you. Not in accusation, more like curiosity. "And what stories do your people tell?" they ask. You stammer. Your brain, full of moss soup and sleep fog, retrieves a fractured version of Little Red Riding Hood. As you mumble through it, their eyebrows rise higher and higher. A girl whispers, "What kind of grandmother doesn't know her own granddaughter?" And the old woman beside you hisses, clearly she wasn't Icelandic. Still, they listen politely. When you finish, someone murmurs, "Maybe the wolf was also a troll." You smile. It fits. Here's a quirky tidbit. Icelanders in the 19th century often reinterpreted foreign stories through a local lens. A prince might become a shepherd. A forest might become a lava field. Cinderella probably did chores in a turf house and got frostbite instead of glass slippers. As the mood shifts again, the Bible is closed and tucked away in a chest, right next to a deck of hand-carved playing cards and a lock of someone's hair. You don't ask whose. Best not to know. Then comes Kvöldvaka, or evening wakefulness, a designated time between dinner and bedtime, where families did their most mentally stimulating activities. Don't get too excited. There are no late-night talk shows here. But there is verse jokes, riddles, and once in a while, a dramatic retelling of someone's trip to Reykjavik that ends with, "And then we saw a steamship." You find yourself grinning at a joke involving a sheep, a marriage proposal, and an unfortunate mistranslation. It doesn't entirely make sense, but the delivery is perfect. Historians still argue whether Kvöldvaka was a way to preserve Icelandic culture, or simply a clever excuse to keep kids too entertained to sneak off and ruin the hayloft? Maybe both. Suddenly, someone pulls out a small fiddle. It looks handmade and slightly warped, but the tune it carries is delicate, wistful. You don't recognize the melody, but it makes your chest ache in that slow, nostalgic way that only old songs can. Others hum along, harmonizing without instruction. The fire crackles louder now, echoing slightly in the sodden walls. The air grows thicker with warmth, the kind that seeps into your socks and makes you forget your toes ever knew cold. You think again of how the Icelanders sleep, not just their two-part slumber, but how their entire day moves like a slow breath. Inhale with work, exhale with story. Inhale with scripture, exhale with song. No sudden jumps, no harsh interruptions. Just one long, slow human rhythm through darkness. And somehow, in the middle of a bleak winter, surrounded by snow, sulfur springs, and the occasional seal wife legend, you've never felt less alone. By now, your body has surrendered to the rhythm of the bad stoffa. Limbs loose, eyes heavy, thoughts sliding like seals across the surface of your mind. And yet, as the final flickers of firelight bend across the room, you become aware of a very Icelandic nighttime ritual still unfolding. It's the winding down of Kvöldvaka, and with it the delicate dance of preparing for the segmented night, those twin sleep periods that shaped every winter day, like parentheses around darkness. You watch as people shift not toward individual beds, but into more deliberate zones of sleep. A few lie down right where they were spinning yarn just moments ago. Others settle under sheepskins near the stove. There's no grand bedtime announcement, just a slow melting into horizontal positions. You follow suit, curling under a wool blanket that smells faintly of lanolin and baked peat. But just as your eyes start to close, something curious happens. A woman, maybe in her 60s, clears her throat and begins to speak not loudly, but with the practiced clarity of someone used to commanding a room. It's not a prayer nor a saga this time. It's a dream, or rather, her memory of a dream from the night before. Everyone listens with genuine interest. Dream sharing was a real part of Icelandic social life, especially during winter. Not just as entertainment, but as a kind of folk psychology and spiritual reflection. Certain dreams were believed to foretell weather patterns, livestock troubles, or family news. Others were just strange and funny, like the man who dreamt a horse proposed marriage to him in perfect Danish. Here's a mainstream historical tidbit. 19th century Icelanders often recorded dreams in personal diaries or family journals, alongside weather data and sheep births. Dreams weren't dismissed as nonsense. They were windows into another world. The woman finishes her tale of a flying goat, and the man next to her offers an interpretation involving fish shortages. You don't understand how those two things connect, but nobody laughs. It's taken seriously, albeit gently. Another woman murmurs that she's dreamt of her brother's boat 3 nights in a row. A quiet nod of concern ripples through the group. You wonder if he's at sea right now. Historians still argue whether these communal dream analyses were rooted more in superstition or early psychological insight. But to you, lying in the thick hush of the turf house, It feels like both, a way to process the unexplainable, a kind of nightly group therapy wrapped in folklore and fog. You finally start to drift, fingers curling instinctively toward warmth when you hear a voice, soft, melodic, begin a lullaby. No accompaniment this time, just a solo voice carrying an old tune in a minor key. The lyrics mention snow and a bird that waits all winter for its mate to return. Your chest aches in that quiet, slow ache you've come to associate with this place. Soon, the room is still, or nearly. There's always a baby somewhere snoring like a tiny walrus. But even the fire seems to hush itself, its embers pulsing rather than crackling. And then comes the first sleep. Unlike modern slumber, one long chunk fueled by electric lights and caffeine withdrawal, the Icelandic segmented sleep unfolds like a ritual itself. First sleep begins not with a snap, but a slow dissolve. It lasts about 4 hours, and you feel yourself sliding into it, like slipping beneath the ice of a calm pond. You wake gently, naturally, some hours later. No one shakes you. No alarm blares. Your eyes open because the room has subtly reanimated. A few people are awake again, sitting up, murmuring softly, drinking warm milk or nibbling leftover bread crusts. This is night watch time, the quiet, mysterious interlude between the two halves of sleep. And it's not considered insomnia, it's expected. It's built into the very pattern of life here. You rise too, wrapping a shawl around your shoulders, and join a couple whispering near the hearth. They're discussing a neighbor's cow and whether its recent behavior suggests an elf curse or just indigestion. The line between the mystical and the mundane is thin here, like the frost coating the outside walls. Here's a curious tidbit. This wakeful hour was often considered a sacred time. Some Icelanders believed it was the best moment for creativity, prayer, or conception. Others just used it to talk quietly and snack. You don't feel groggy. In fact, you feel oddly clear-headed, like your mind has been gently rinsed in glacier water. Someone hands you a piece of dried fish wrapped in a cloth, chewy, salty, and somehow exactly what your body wants. You chew in silence, soaking in the sounds, low voices, a sleepy cough, the creak of shifting wool. It's like existing inside a living lullaby. Eventually, without needing to be told, you and everyone else begin to settle again. No fanfare, just the second descent, slower and deeper than the first. This is second sleep, and it will carry you into the light, or what little light Iceland can manage in January. As your breath slows and your thoughts begin to wander again, you think about how this place doesn't rush toward rest the way you do back home. Here, sleep is not the interruption, it's the rhythm. A rhythm you're finally learning to move with. You wake to stillness, not the brittle silence of city mornings, but a deep, insulating quiet that feels more like sound being held in someone's hands. Your eyes blink open. A gray, watery light filters through a sheep bladder window pane, the kind of light that says day but makes no promises about warmth. Congratulations, you've survived the night like a proper 19th century Icelander. Barely. You stretch beneath the heavy wool, your joints a little stiff, but your mind oddly refreshed. Around you, others begin to stir as well, emerging from their turf nest cocoons. No one leaps from bed. Instead, there's a slow domino of movement, yawns, nose blowing, someone gently poking the embers of last night's fire. And now it's time for the morning rituals. Small, practical ceremonies performed with the same reverence monks might give to prayer beads, except these involve fermented dairy and a suspicious bucket of lukewarm water. You sit up and accept a bowl of surmjölk, or sour milk. It tastes like yogurt that got into a fight with vinegar and somehow won. But after one cautious spoonful, your stomach gives a happy rumble. Your body, strange as it sounds, actually likes this. The cool tang, the creaminess. It's exactly the kind of bracing Icelandic breakfast that keeps you from turning into a human icicle before noon. Here's a historical fact to chew on while you sip your sour milk. Icelanders in the 19th century rarely had fresh dairy. Most milk was fermented to preserve it through the long winters. Combined with dried fish, coarse rye bread, and the occasional slab of boiled lamb, it formed a diet surprisingly rich in protein and probiotic mystery. As you eat, someone passes you a comb. You hesitate. There's no mirror. Do you just guess you do? The result isn't pretty, but you suddenly don't care. No one here is winning beauty contests, and frankly, everyone smells faintly of sheep anyway. Now comes the ritual of dressing, which in this house is done with tactical precision. Garments are passed around, layers added like geological strata. First the woolens, then the skins, then a final shawl that smells faintly of cedar, and curiously something smoky and sweet, perhaps last month's lamb roast. You step outside to relieve yourself. Yes, that's part of the ritual too. The outhouse is technically just a wooden box over a pit with an unbeatable view of frostbitten lava fields. But in that moment, as you breathe the sharp, clean air and gaze at the distant ice-crusted hills, you feel something strange. You feel alive and cold. So cold. You finish your business in record time and dash back inside, boots crunching across hardened snow. Here's your quirky tidbit of the morning. Many Icelanders in this era believe that exposing oneself too suddenly to warmth after a night's sleep could shock the body. Fires were kindled slowly. Hot drinks were sipped gradually. You didn't leap from bed to scalding stew. You tiptoed your way back to the waking world, one cup of lukewarm whey at a time. Historians still argue whether these customs were driven more by superstition, practical survival, or just an aversion to wasting firewood. Probably all three. Icelanders were nothing if not thrifty. Back in the badstofa, someone is brushing their boots with a handful of dried moss. Another person sharpens a knife using a flat stone and the corner of their sleeve. There's no rush, just methodical motion, the rhythm of morning repeated hundreds of times each winter. A child grumbles about going outside to check on the sheep. His father raises one eyebrow, and suddenly the kid is up and bundling himself in fur like a reluctant yeti. You stifle a laugh. You, however, are not expected to do much today. Guessed, they remind you with a mix of amusement and pity. But someone does hand you a small broom and point at the floor with a grin. Fair enough. As you sweep ash and wool fluff into a neat little pile, your mind drifts again. How strange to feel so rested after a night of fragmented sleep and singing goats. Maybe it's the slow pace. Maybe it's the lack of glowing rectangles. Maybe it's just the sour milk doing mysterious Nordic magic in your gut. Whatever it is, your modern anxieties, deadlines, emails, the odd worry about how your hair looks in candlelight have started to feel very far away. The family begins to plan the day aloud. Will the weather hold? Is the neighbor's sheep still acting weird? Should they send someone to the priest with that letter tied in seal skin? You meanwhile wonder whether they'll let you help bake flatbread later, or try spinning wool, or if they'll tell you another story about the woman who married a fox and never regretted it. But for now, someone pours you a second helping of sour milk and offers a hunk of bread still warm from the hearthstone. You bite into it, steam curling up into your face. It tastes of smoke rye and satisfaction. Morning has arrived in Iceland, not with a bang, but with a bowl of breeze and a song still lingering in the walls. Later that morning, you find yourself sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, staring at a lump of unspun wool, like it just told you it knows your browser history. A woman, her hands weathered, her voice soft, demonstrates the spindle's rhythm again. Twist, pull, wind. Twist, pull, wind. The wool stretches, thins, and tightens like magic, becoming a thread fine enough to weave into clothing ropes, or possibly a new identity. You try it yourself. The spindle immediately rebels, drops to the floor, and rolls under a bench. So much for blending in. But no one laughs. The woman merely hands it back with a wink as if to say, "Don't worry, my first thread looked like a sheep sneezed." This is the rhythm of domestic labor in winter, slow, steady, and shared. Every movement in the turf house, from spinning to carding to knitting, contributes to the survival of the family. It's not glamorous, but it is grounding. You lose track of time, the spindle like a metronome, syncing your breath to the tempo of life here. Here's your historical anchor for today. In 19th century Iceland, nearly every household relied on wool production, not just for personal use, but for trade. Homespun wool was a crucial part of the rural economy, often bartered for necessities, like coffee sugar or fishing gear. And it wasn't just the women, men, and children spun, too, especially during the long dark months when outdoor labor paused. The quirky tidbit children were sometimes taught to spin before they could write. There are records of 5-year-olds producing thread suitable for mittens. Meanwhile, you're here making yarn that could double as kindling. A low fire crackles beside you, warming your hands and the soles of your boots. The smell of lanolin is everywhere, earthy, waxy, oddly comforting. Overhead, strings of drying herbs hang like sleepy jungle vines, swaying faintly in the warm air. From the far end of the Badstofa, someone begins to recite a rimur, a traditional epic poem. The voice is low and sing-song, rising and falling in hypnotic waves. It's the tale of Grettir the Strong, an outlaw with terrible manners, but an unkillable spirit. You follow only half the words, but the cadence works on you like a charm. Even the sheepdog has settled down, tail thumping in rhythm. Historians still argue about the role of rhymer. Were they mainly for moral instruction, entertainment, or preserving oral history? Likely all three. What's clear is that they shaped Iceland's literary culture long before novels and Netflix. You take a break from spinning and walk to the window, window in the loosest sense. A thin bladder membrane stretched across a hole in the wall, filtering what little light exists, like the world's saddest lampshade. Outside, the snow has stopped. In its place, a kind of silver fog has settled, blanketing the landscape in soft unreality. Inside, you notice the Badstofa seems to hum, not audibly, but in a metaphysical way. There's a collective energy here, not frantic, but fluid. No one is rushing yet. Everything gets done. Children mend socks, elders twist ropes. Someone is darning a hole in a pair of mittens with more concentration than you've ever brought to a tax form. And you realize something: this constant togetherness. It's not just a feature of Icelandic turf houses, it's a survival mechanism. In a country with no central heating and no night that ends quickly, solitude isn't cozy, it's dangerous. You live close, sleep close, work close. There's no word in Icelandic for personal space, you suspect. Or, if there is, it's probably reserved for volcanoes. You return to your spindle and try again. Twist, pull, wind. Twist, pull, snap. You sigh, but before you can get frustrated, a boy not older than 8 reaches over and expertly ties the end for you. No words, just a nod. A few hours pass this way. Wool piles up beside you, uneven but passable. Your hands begin to find their rhythm. Your mind wanders less. You don't think about emails or bills or the last thing you forgot to do. Just the thread. Just the present. Someone brings you a small cup of warm broth, thick with barley and tiny flecks of dried lamb. It tastes like winter comfort, like something your great-great-grandmother would have sworn could cure heartbreak. You sip slowly, the steam fogging your cheeks. The woman beside you begins a story, not a saga, not a rhymer, but a simple tale. A fox who outwits a farmer. A girl who grows flowers in a cave. The kind of story you'd call a fable, though here it's just life. Lessons wrapped in fur and snowflakes. Historians still debate whether these tales were ever meant for children or simply adapted by generations who understood the value of a good metaphor about a stubborn goat. You chuckle softly at the ending. The girl marries the fox again. That fox must have been quite the charmer. The day lingers on like a candle refusing to burn out. You've done nothing productive by modern standards. No emails sent, no productivity apps opened. And yet you've spun wool, shared stories, listened, eaten, existed. And you feel fuller than you have in weeks. As dusk returns, and with it, that gray-blue hue that makes every turf house glow faintly from within. You realize the line between day and night, rest and labor, solitude and community is far blurrier than you ever imagined. You stretch your fingers, place the spindle down, and smile. Twist, pull, wind. You're getting the hang of it. The evening draws near, and the air begins to carry that peculiar chill that promises both comfort and caution. The fire has been stoked, but it hasn't yet found its true warmth. A few last moments of daylight slip away like someone quickly drawing the blinds. The sound of the hearth crackling fills the space, but beneath that, another rhythm has begun, the soft murmur of conversation and the click-clack of knitting needles. It's time to settle into the evening. For Icelanders in the 19th century, the transition from day to night was as natural as the moon's rise, slower than most cultures, but just as necessary. The whole house seems to breathe with a collective exhale. Time for stories. Time for quiet. You make your way toward the hearth where the long wooden benches have been arranged around the fire, and the air is thick with the smell of burning birch and lamb stew. You take a seat between two older women, one of whom has a small dog nestled in her lap, the other knitting a sock the size of a small pillow. The dog looks at you with lazy eyes, as though you are an interesting but ultimately irrelevant part of the scenery. The light outside has faded to twilight, that liminal period when the snow glows softly, reflecting the last traces of sunlight. Inside, it's the golden warmth of the fire that holds your attention. There's no hurry to light the candles yet. The fire does the job well enough, casting shadows on the walls in irregular shapes. You get the distinct feeling that time here isn't measured in minutes, but in moments. Moments of calm, moments of reflection, moments of togetherness. Someone in the room coughs. Someone else chuckles. The boy who fixed your spindle earlier is now twiddling a piece of string, trying to get the dog to chase it. No one bothers to stop him, for no one really cares. There is a collective understanding that people are meant to move at their own pace, just like the wool you spent the day spinning. No rush, no real destination, only the act itself. And then, just as your mind begins to float, the matriarch of the house, an older woman with silver hair and a sharp eye, clears her throat. The story begins. She speaks softly, her voice rising and falling like the wind outside. But there's power in it. Power in the way she spins words together, weaving them into the fabric of the evening. Her tale is about a lost treasure, a chest of gold buried beneath a glacier by a band of pirates centuries ago, hidden away so thoroughly that no one has ever found it. As she tells the tale, her eyes flicker with a little spark of mischief, as though she knows something you don't, as though she might know exactly where that treasure lies. But you also sense something deeper in her storytelling, a rhythm that's not about the treasure itself, but about the way stories hold communities together. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Icelandic sagas were traditionally passed down through generations by word of mouth, not written down until the 13th century. The oral tradition is still very much alive in many Icelandic families. They're not just stories. They're an ongoing conversation between generations, a living history shared between everyone gathered around the fire. Historians still debate the role of these stories. Are they simply for entertainment? Or do they hold some deeper, more mystical understanding of the world? Some argue they carry important moral lessons, while others insist they were just ways to keep everyone entertained during the long winter months. Most likely, it's a mix of both. But one thing is certain in this room: the story feels real. As the matriarch continues, you lean back into the warmth of the fire and let her words wash over you. You're no longer just an observer. You're part of the story, part of this ancient tradition. You think of the wool you spun, the simple tasks that held such importance. And now, as evening settles in, you realize that the storytelling itself is another kind of labor. just as necessary as spinning, weaving, or tending to the sheep. It's an act of preservation, of keeping history alive for another generation. The tale twists and turns with pirates' cursed jewels and strange creatures lurking in the shadows. You find yourself caught up in the drama, your senses heightened by the crackling of the fire and the rhythmic sound of the old woman's voice. As the story reaches its climax, the dog in the corner lets out a soft snore, and the little boy has abandoned his string, now curled up at his mother's side. It's clear that the magic of this moment is a shared one. It's not the treasure in the story that matters, but the connection between everyone in the room. The sense of community, of belonging to something larger than yourself, is what keeps you anchored. The matriarch ends the tale with a satisfied sigh, letting the silence hang in the air. The fire crackles, and for a few long seconds, no one moves. You realize that despite the cold night outside, you've never felt warmer. There's a comfort in being here in this moment, surrounded by people who are tied together not just by blood, but by tradition. And as the evening wears on, you feel your own connection to this place growing stronger. The matriarch stands smoothing her skirts. With a nod, she signals that it's time to retire for the night. The room begins to shift, the quiet murmur of good nights slipping from person to person like a shared secret. Historians still argue whether the old woman truly believed in the treasure's existence, or if the whole tale was simply a way to pass the time during a long, dark night. But in that moment, none of that matters. What matters is that you've witnessed something far more valuable, a piece of Icelandic soul passed down through generations. A piece of history that for just a few hours you got to be part of. The fire flickers down to embers and the room goes quiet. You take a deep breath, ready to step into the comfort of sleep once again. The room is quiet now, save for the soft rustling of blankets and the distant thump of the dog settling into a new position. You slide beneath your own covers, feeling the weight of the woolen blanket pull you into its embrace, and the warmth from the fire seems to follow you even after it's been reduced to little more than glowing embers. Outside, the wind picks up again, rattling the windows and sending a low, almost musical sound through the cracks. It's the same rhythm every night, the same song of winter that never quite fades. Here in the far north, the wind is as much a part of life as the sun, only it's far less friendly. You settle deeper into the bed, pulling the covers around you, and for a moment, you simply listen to the quiet. There's something profound in this silence, a kind of quiet communion between you and the night. It's not unsettling. Rather, it feels comforting, like a lullaby you've heard 1,000 times, but can never grow tired of. While the sounds of Icelandic winter are not typically soothing to outsiders, blizzards, howling winds, snowdrifts the size of mountains inside the house, it's another world. The world of safety, of warmth, of togetherness. And as you lie there, you begin to wonder how anyone could survive these long nights without this comforting intimacy. In 19th century Iceland, the dark winters were more than just a weather condition. They were a defining part of the culture. The long dark nights weren't just a time of rest. They were a time to reflect, to bond, and to reflect again. People came together in the warmth of their homes, not only to keep each other warm, but to keep each other sane. This is when people shared their lives, their stories, their hopes. Nighttime was a form of resistance to the harshness of the world outside, and in a way it was one of the few moments of control people had over their environment. You couldn't control the snow, the ice, or the wind, but you could control your space. You could control how you spent your time in the warmth of your home. Even in their sleep, Icelanders were communing with the land, their bodies unknowingly attuned to the slow rhythms of winter. The way they slept side by side, huddled together under thick layers, was as much a survival mechanism as it was a way to reinforce community. The bed was a symbol of interconnectedness. Everyone shared warmth, both physical and emotional. You think of the family around you, the way they moved seamlessly from task to task, never hurrying but always progressing. The way they shared their stories, their laughter, their small frustrations. It's easy to see how the Icelandic people have maintained such strong family bonds through the centuries. Historians still argue over whether this sense of community was born out of necessity or cultivated over generations. Some believe it was purely practical, the sheer necessity of survival in such harsh conditions required constant cooperation. Others argue that Icelanders developed this culture because of the isolation. Either way, what's clear is that this spirit of shared experience is woven into the very fabric of Icelandic life. As you feel your eyelids grow heavier, the last thought flutters through your mind like a feather on the breeze. You can't help but imagine that in a way, Icelanders sleep not just for rest, but for hope. Hope that tomorrow's daylight, however brief, will bring another chance to live through the season, another day of shared existence. And then as your body relaxes fully into the comfort of the bed, the last thing you hear is the soft breathing of those around you. The dog, the boy, the matriarch, the others. It's a symphony of sound, soft and steady like the rhythmic pulse of the earth itself. You know you're safe here. This is a way of life long past, yet it feels as if you've just stepped into it, experiencing it for the first time, like the cold wind outside this quiet hum will stay with you even as you drift off to sleep. Historians still debate what it would have been like to live through these long winters. Were they truly marked by a sense of longing, as some suggest, or did the Icelandic people actually find comfort in the very things we think of as hardships? Perhaps like you, they embraced the quiet, the stillness, and the sense of belonging. With the soft sound of the wind and the warmth of the fire still in your mind, you surrender yourself to sleep, drifting slowly and peacefully through the Icelandic winter night. The morning light breaks through the small cracks in the thick wooden walls, just enough to cast a soft glow on the room. It's still early, but you're already awake, your body moving in tune with the cycle of nature as it always has. The light filtering in seems to stretch lazily, barely brushing the tops of your blankets before the wind picks up again, bringing with it the scent of snow and frost. You stretch beneath the covers, still half wrapped in the warmth of sleep, and for a moment you imagine what it must have been like to wake up every day in this land. How in the dead of winter, the warmth of a fire and the togetherness of those around you were the only things that mattered. You think of the way the snow falls in silent, rhythmic patterns outside. The landscape is as untouched as a painting, but more treacherous than anything a mere canvas could ever depict. There is a certain magic to waking up during the winter months in Iceland, especially back in the 19th century. The stillness of the morning was a reminder that, once again, you had survived another night. You're alive and you're still here among friends and family. But beyond that winter was a kind of reset, a chance to gather strength for the coming year. It was about self-sufficiency and perseverance in the face of something far beyond your control. The first thing you notice when you sit up is the smell of breakfast, rich, hearty, and warm. Someone has been up long before you, and the promise of food fills the room. A simple breakfast in Icelandic homes often meant oats, dried fish, and bread. Not much, but it was filling, and it would carry you through the day. You slip into your clothes, feeling the warmth from your woolen layers as they cocoon your body. They're not just clothing, they're a way of life. Wool has been part of Icelandic culture for centuries. The art of shearing, spinning, and weaving wool was a skill passed down through generations, almost like a sacred tradition. In a way, it connected Icelanders to their ancestors, to the land itself. The wool provided warmth, protection, and most importantly, it kept the family unit together during those long winter nights. Historians still debate the exact origins of the Icelandic wool industry, but one thing is clear, it's not just about clothing, it's about survival. Icelanders were often self-sufficient, making their own clothes and tools from the materials around them. The wool wasn't just spun and woven for comfort, it was a matter of life and death. As you make your way toward the kitchen, you notice that the house is already awake, the soft murmur of conversation rising like the scent of freshly brewed coffee. The matriarch is already seated at the head of the table, her weathered hands expertly working on a piece of wool as she speaks. The boy is there too, still half asleep, but sitting dutifully at the table, looking around in a daze as he tries to remember where he left his boots. It's a quiet, steady morning, one that you would never find in any bustling metropolis. There's no rushing, no hurry. You get the sense that time here moves in its own slow rhythm, each moment stretching into the next like the long winter nights. Everything feels grounded, a part of the earth itself. The weather outside continues to shift, the wind picking up again and sending snow flurries past the window. The house seems to hold its breath as it prepares for another day in the land of ice and fire. The rhythm of daily life has begun once more. But even within this calm, the danger of the environment remains ever present. The sudden change in weather could turn deadly in a heartbeat, and the fact that you were all still alive, surrounded by each other in this warm, secure house, was a victory in itself. The harshness of winter always loomed just outside like a shadow you could never quite escape. But here in this space you were safe. There's a subtle understanding in the room as everyone sits down to breakfast. It's not just about the food. It's about the connection, the fact that everyone made it through another day and night. There's a sense of accomplishment in that. The matriarch shares a few words with you as you eat, nothing grand, just a simple update on the weather or a comment on how the sheep are faring in the snow. It's mundane, yes, but somehow it feels like a ritual. There's comfort in the mundane routines of the household. They ground you, reminding you of what's truly important, the people around you, and the little things that make life meaningful. You can hear the children's laughter from the other room, followed by the gentle sound of someone scolding them for running indoors. You smile, knowing this too is part of the ebb and flow of life here. It's a reminder that life goes on even in the most isolated places. No matter the season, no matter the weather, there's always room for a little laughter. Historians still debate the idea of Icelandic self-sufficiency, how much was truly necessary for survival, and how much was simply a part of the culture. Was the community spirit born out of necessity, or was it a reflection of the Icelandic way of life? Whatever the reason, it's clear that this culture of togetherness and self-reliance shaped the people here in a profound way. And so as you sit there, eating your simple meal and taking in the warmth of the room, you understand something. The winter, with all its harshness, was also a great equalizer. The same storm that could strip away everything from an Icelandic farmstead also brought people together in ways that would have been unimaginable elsewhere. As the last of the breakfast dishes are cleared, you feel a sense of peace settle over the room once more. You're not just alive, you're part of something much larger, something that has been passed down through the generations. And as you head outside to tend to the chores, you realize that in Iceland, survival is never about the fight. It's about the bond. The wind has shifted by the time you step outside, colder and sharper than before, biting through your woolen clothing like it's made of ice shards. You quickly adjust, pulling your scarf tighter around your neck, the only thing between you and the cold that seems to cling to your skin like a second layer. Even so, there's a comforting rhythm to this. The cold is familiar now, almost expected, like an old friend who's never quite on time but always shows up. Your boots crunch through the snow, leaving prints behind as you walk toward the barn where the sheep and livestock are kept. You move with the purposeful grace of someone who has done this 1,000 times. This too is a kind of ritual, the daily check-in with the animals. Their survival depends on you, and in turn, you depend on them. In the distance, the snow-covered hills stand still, their white peaks blending with the sky. The landscape is both stark and beautiful, a reminder that everything here exists at the mercy of nature. The rhythm of life, the passage of time, is set by the elements. Every step, every action is a response to what the land demands of you. As you reach the barn, the smell of hay and warm animal breath greets you. The animals huddle together for warmth, much like the humans inside the house. You check their food and water, making sure they're secure. It's not much, but it's enough. In Iceland, that's often the case, just enough to survive the day. The harshness of winter forces a kind of humility in the people who live here. There's no space for excess, no room for waste. Everything serves a purpose. Food, clothing, shelter. All are precious commodities, and nothing goes unused. Even the wool from the sheep isn't just for clothes. It can be turned into ropes, blankets, or even mats to line the floor. As you finish your rounds in the barn and make your way back toward the house, you begin to think about the life of an Icelander during this time. What would it have been like to grow up in a land where the seasons dictated your every move? Every decision from what to eat to where to sleep was influenced by the fierce forces of nature. The more you think about it, the more you realize that this constant struggle against the elements wasn't a source of misery for Icelanders. It was a source of pride. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving in the most difficult conditions. They learned to read the weather, to adapt to the landscape, and to make the most of what they had. This lifestyle forged a kind of resilience that would become ingrained in the Icelandic identity. The people here over centuries learned to live in harmony with the land. There was no room for defeat, only the will to endure and adapt. And perhaps that's why to this day Icelanders are known for their independent spirit. As you head back inside, your face flushed from the cold and your hands slightly numb from the chill, you realize something remarkable. The bond between the people and the land is more than just functional. It's emotional. The cold, the isolation, the relentless winters, they don't just shape the lifestyle of the Icelandic people. They shape their very souls. Historians still argue about whether the Icelandic resilience was born from necessity or cultivated from a deep connection with the land itself. Some say the harsh winters fostered the independence and endurance of the Icelandic people, while others believe it was the land itself that created the spirit of self-sufficiency. Either way, there's no denying that this way of life shaped an entire culture. The very essence of Iceland, from its sagas to its modern identity, reflects this unique relationship between its people and the natural world. And you can't help but feel a sense of pride in having briefly stepped into that world, even just for a moment. As you slip inside, the warmth of the fire hits you once again. You take a deep breath, knowing that the rest of the day awaits. But for now, there's a moment of peace. The work isn't done, it never truly is, but there's a brief respite here. A quiet shared moment of contentment. You return to the warmth of the house, feeling the weight of the day's work already lifting from your shoulders. Life in Iceland has never been easy, but it's always been worth it. The bond between people, land, and family is something that doesn't just fade with the seasons. It lasts, enduring through the years, and perhaps it's that very bond that has allowed Iceland to survive and thrive in the most unforgiving of environments. And so as the night begins to fall once more and the wind howls outside, you find comfort in the thought that tomorrow will be another day of survival, of resilience, and of connection. As the evening darkens, the fire crackles in the hearth, its flickering light casting long shadows across the room. The once icy landscape outside now feels a world away as the warmth wraps around you like a comforting embrace. The wind, though still relentless, can no longer touch you here. Inside, the air smells of wood and heat, and a strange stillness fills the space. The quiet hum of a home preparing for another night in the long winter. You take a deep breath and sit back, feeling the softness of the woolen blankets beneath you. The work for the day is done, but that doesn't mean it's time to rest just yet. In Icelandic homes, the evenings often revolved around storytelling, music, and quiet companionship. It's a time for families to reconnect after the labors of the day, to share stories, pass down knowledge, and remind one another of what they've all survived together. You hear the voice of an elder rise in the corner of the room, telling one of the age-old sagas that have been passed down for generations. The sagas, those long, epic tales of Viking conquests and family drama, were more than just stories. They were a way to connect with the past, to understand who you were and where you came from. The sagas were written during the Middle Ages, but they continued to hold meaning in the 19th century, especially during the long winter nights when the world outside seemed too vast, too cold to make sense of. The tradition of oral storytelling became a thread that connected generations, creating a shared memory for every family that sat around the fire. You sit back and listen, your mind wandering with the rhythm of the words. The flickering light of the fire dances across the faces of the listeners. You're not just part of this moment, you're part of something much older. You can feel the weight of history in the room, the accumulated knowledge of those who have gone before you. The family unit in Iceland wasn't just about survival. It was about maintaining the continuity of tradition, about passing down skills, stories, and memories to ensure that nothing was ever truly lost. As the night stretches on, the fire continues to burn low, and the room begins to settle into the quiet. The stories fade into the background, replaced by the soft murmurs of those who are preparing for bed. A few are still at the table talking softly about the day's events, sharing quiet laughter. But soon, everyone begins to retreat into their own spaces. You climb into your bed, pulling the covers tightly around you. The wind howls outside again, a constant reminder that the world beyond is still as wild and unpredictable as it ever was. But here inside this little home, you are safe. You are not alone. You are part of a larger story, one that stretches far back into the past, and one that will continue far into the future. The cycle of the seasons will continue, bringing more winters, more work, more challenges. But it will also bring more moments like this, more time spent in the warmth of family and firelight, more nights where stories are shared and memories are made. As the night deepens, you find yourself drifting off the gentle rhythm of the fire and the soft hum of the world outside, lulling you towards sleep. Historians still debate whether the importance of these nightly rituals, these moments of connection, was something born of necessity or something more profound. Perhaps it was a little of both. What's clear, though, is that these simple acts, telling stories, eating together, working side by side, became the bedrock of Icelandic culture. They were what held the people together, even when the weather, the land, and the world seemed intent on tearing them apart. You close your eyes, the warmth of the room enveloping you like a blanket of your own. The day is over, and you've made it through just like all those who came before you. And tomorrow you'll do it all again. But for now, you let go of the weight of the world, and you surrender to the comfort of sleep. The wind outside is nothing more than a distant murmur now. Inside the house is a sanctuary of warmth, a place where you are protected, and the only thing left to do is rest. Now, as the last embers of the fire fade into a soft glow, you drift deeper into sleep, carried by the quiet rhythms of the night. It's a peaceful end to a hard day, a day that, like the rest, was shaped by the land, by the cold, and by the resilience of the people who call Iceland home.